When I was in 7th grade, I was the target of bullies. When I'd go to school, in the hallways, there were always kids shoving me, pushing me. When I'd go into a classroom, if the teacher wasn't there, a group of boys would surround me and kick me. And this happened every day. Every day I was being pushed, shoved, threatened, kicked, hit. I told teachers, and nothing ever happened. I told my parents. They didn't know what to do about it. It just kept going on and on. Now, I was brought up never to fight, never to throw a punch. I grew up in a church that taught never fight, never use violence. So I never did. But one night at the supper table, my dad in frustration said, "Ryan, go ahead and hit him." I was so excited. This was great. Now I'm going to be able to fight back. I'm going to teach those bullies a lesson. And so the next day, I went to school with confidence. I walked into one of those classrooms. The teacher wasn't there. And sure enough, a group of about 5 boys got up from their chairs. They surrounded me. They started kicking me. And I grabbed one of those kids by the collar of his shirt, and I raised my fist, and I just couldn't hit him. I mean, he was looking at me. He was scared as could be, and it just didn't seem right to punch him. But I didn't know what to do, so I'm holding on to his collar. I got my fist up like this. I'm not sure what to do. This kid, he's freaking out. He's punching me. He's hitting me on the cheeks back and forth like this. I'm still not sure what to do. And then he picks up a pencil and he stabs me right here. Well, blood came out. That stopped the fight right there. They had to take me to a doctor for stitches. After that, the bullies never bothered me again. I think they were ashamed. That boy who stabbed me for the next couple of weeks, he was afraid of me. He would avoid me in the halls. He was afraid I would retaliate. I didn't retaliate. I didn't think about him. On the last day of school, as I was sitting in the cafeteria, I was drawing a picture of a car, and this boy sat down next to me, and he looked at my drawing, and he said, "Hey, that's a neat car." And I said, "Thanks." I guess that was his way of saying he was sorry, and we made peace. Love your enemies. Do good to those who abuse you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. This is probably the most radical, ridiculous, and important statement Jesus ever made. Now, we're living in a society that is certainly not living by love your enemies. This is the last thing that we're doing at this time, is love our enemies. We have no tolerance for people of that other political party. We have no tolerance for people who use words or actions or take stands that we find offensive. We are not about to do good to those who hate us. We're not about to bless those who curse us. That's the last thing we're going to do. And yet here's Jesus telling us, you got to change. You've got to change. And if we're Christians, if we are followers of Jesus, frankly, we don't have a choice. We must love our enemies. Now, love does not mean like. It doesn't mean emotional attraction or affection. What Jesus is talking about is to care, to value, to respect, to want an ultimate good for that other person, to treat them and do for them what you would want them to do to you. That's love. Jesus gives 3 radical illustrations of what he's talking about. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. Boy, I remember when I was a teenager, my eldest brother, 5 years older than me, he slapped me. I was shocked. In fact, I would say that was the most disrespected I have ever felt in my life, being slapped on the cheek. Frankly, I would have preferred being punched than being slapped. Slapping just sort of takes away the other person's dignity. Now, how should I respond to this? Should I punch my brother? This is the situation that Jesus is talking about. He's probably not talking about fist fights. He's talking about being insulted. You've been insulted. How are you going to respond to an insult? Are you going to punch the person? Are you going to take them to court and sue them for assault and battery? What are you going to do if you've been insulted? And Jesus' response is this shocking response. Turn the other cheek. It's an action, but it's not a reaction. It is calm rather than angry. It is seeking resolution rather than retaliation. It is brave rather than fearful. It is surprising. It is disarming. It undercuts a building up of hostility. I think it maybe shames the other person. Helps them to change what they're doing. Jesus gives another shocking illustration. He says, and from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. I think the context here is that someone has taken you to court and is suing you for your coat, your cloak, because you can't pay a debt that you owe. Now, in the Old Testament, in the laws of Moses, it's actually against the law to demand a person who's impoverished. It's against the law to take their cloak overnight, because that cloak is essential. That's essential for survival. For an impoverished person, this is the only way they can stay warm at night. And that's why you can't take it away overnight. But Jesus is saying here, if you are impoverished, you can't pay that debt, and the person you owe that money to demands your cloak, give it to him. And then take off your shirt and give that to him too. I think perhaps this is shaming the other person, helping them recognize that what they're doing isn't right. Well, Jesus goes on to another shocking illustration. Give to everyone who begs from you, and if anyone takes away your goods, don't ask for them again. If anyone takes away your goods, that sounds like somebody is a thief robbing you. I don't think, though, that that's actually the context. I think more likely we're talking about you have lent somebody money and they haven't repaid you. They won't repay you. You've lent them perhaps tools and they won't give them back. I think that's more likely the context. I know over the years, many people have come to me and have asked for, a bit of money. Could I have 20 bucks? Could I have 50 bucks? I really need it. I need to pay off this little thing here. I'll pay you back next week. I guarantee I'll pay you back next week as soon as I get that paycheck. I can't remember a single time I have ever been paid back. So what should I do about that? Should I get angry and decide, all right, from now on, I'm never giving anybody any money because I never get paid back? Is that what I should do? Should I regard people who are in desperate circumstances who don't pay me back? Are they enemies now? And Jesus says, no. No, a person in need is a person in need. Respond to that need. Don't close your heart, open your heart. Be as generous with them as you would want people to be generous with you if you were in the same circumstance. If you love those who love you, how's that special? Even sinners do that. If you do good to those who do good to you, how's that special? Even sinners do that. If you lend to those whom you hope to receive, how's that special? Even sinners do that. By sinners, Jesus means those who don't keep the law, those who don't care about the laws of Moses, those who don't care about the food laws or the Sabbath laws or maybe a bunch of other laws too. If we were putting this into today's language, I think it would be something like, even people who aren't religious, even people who aren't spiritual, even people who are selfish hedonists, they'll do good to people who do good to them. They'll love people who love them. We'll do I'll scratch your back if you'll scratch my back. And Jesus is saying, if that's all we're doing, we'll never change the world. The world will never change. The world will never change if all we're doing is loving those who love us. We got to break this. We got to change this. We have to have the courage to love those who are not loving us, to bless those who are cursing us, to respond in a different way. Now, what's the strategy here? What does Jesus actually think is going to happen? Is he hoping that, if we do this, that this is going to, reduce violence, reduce the escalation of hostility? Or is Jesus' strategy that if we do good, that this is going to overcome, our kindness will overcome our opponents? Is he assuming that these positive actions will shame our opponents and change their minds? Or is Jesus saying, regardless of whether this works or not, this is who God is. This is God's character. Well, I think the truth is all of these. I think that Jesus is hoping that this does undercut escalation of hostilities. I think he is hoping that kindness will overcome our opponents, that some of these actions may shame the opponent, help them to realize the wrong that they're doing. But regardless of whether it works or not, that's ultimately not what matters. What matters is that we be like God. Your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, for he's kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. We must be like God. We must be merciful. We must show unconditional compassion to everyone, because that's who God is. That's what God does for us. Will this work on the international stage? How about nations that are enemies of each other? Should we do this? Should we love our enemies? Maybe. One time Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev They met in Switzerland to negotiate a reduction of nuclear weapons. It wasn't going well. They didn't trust each other. Their two negotiating teams were running into problems. They didn't trust each other. There was hostility. It just wasn't going anywhere. And then Reagan invited Gorbachev to go off by themselves, go for a walk. They just took the translators with them. And Reagan asked Gorbachev this question. He said, if the United States were to be invaded by aliens from outer space, would the Soviet Union come to our aid? Gorbachev responded, certainly we would. If the United States were invaded by aliens from outer space, we'd help you. And then Reagan said to Gorbachev, and we would do the same for you. That bizarre interchange, and it is pretty bizarre, it's a strange conversation, but it broke through. It helped them to see each other as having the same needs, the same desires, the same worth. And that was the breakthrough. When they came back, they started the negotiations again. They had a different spirit, and it took off from there. Eventually, they negotiated a nuclear arms reduction greater than anything that had ever been seen before. A few years ago, I had the great privilege of meeting Daryl Davis. Now, Daryl Davis is famous for two things. First of all, he's one of the greatest keyboardists of all time in rhythm and blues and boogie woogie. He backed up Chuck Berry, Jerry Lee Lewis. This guy's a phenomenal keyboardist. He's famous for another thing, though. He's famous for befriending dozens of KKK members. And through those friendships, those Klan members leave the Klan. Now, Daryl is black. When he was 10 years old, he was a Cub Scout. He was in a Cub Scout parade. He was at the front of the parade holding an American flag. And as he's marching along, there's some bystanders that are throwing things at him, bottles and other things. And he can't figure out why they're doing that. He's thinking to himself, they must not like the Cub Scouts. It's not until he got home that his mother said to him, the reason why some people were throwing things at you is because they hate you because of the color of your skin. And Daryl couldn't believe that. He thought his mother was lying to him. He had never encountered racial prejudice. He had grown up overseas. His dad was a diplomat. They'd gone all over the place. He'd never experienced racial prejudice until he came back here to the United States as a 10-year-old. And it created in him this question that he needed to get answered. He wanted to ask these white people who were throwing things at him, he wanted to ask them, why do you hate me when you know nothing about me? He was able to ask that question of the imperial wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. He was able to set up a meeting with this person, and they sat down, and he said, tell me what your attitude is towards me as a black man. Tell me, where does it come from? Tell me your story. And then I'll tell you my story. And they had this conversation, and the two became friends. And that led to other conversations with other Klan members and other Klan leaders in other places. Over time, he developed dozens of these friendships, and dozens of these Klan members left the Klan and gave him their Klan robes and insignias. In 2017, at the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, the leader of the Confederate White Knights, Richard Preston, was arrested because he had shot a gun at the counter-protesters. Daryl Davis offered to put up his bail and later took him to the National Museum of African American History in Washington, D.C. They became friends. Richard asked Darrell, when Richard got married, he asked Darrell to walk his bride down the aisle. Now, this is a different way of defeating your enemies. This is a very different way of defeating your enemies. This is pretty shocking. This is controversial. This is really radical. And this is the way of Jesus.